So the morning of 9/11, as the nation's enemies were initiating their mission of destruction, when the Defense Department had no idea, when the intelligence agencies had no idea, the world's most sophisticated early warning system 20 years ago failed to discern the ancient biblical alarm that warned cities of the enemy's attack was sounding. There is an appointed time in the Hebrew year when the sound of the watchman is heard in the early hours of the day. Only a small window of days when that sound converges with the reciting of scriptures linked to judgment or a national judgment of a nation. The context is a nation that had known God like Israel but turned away. And so the scriptures are recited and the shofar is sounded and it's pleading for mercy. The prayers are called the silachot, the prayers for mercy in light of judgment. And they're recited in the early morning, and the trumpets are sounded in the early morning, and they are linked to the rising of the sun. One of those days was September 11, 2001. The morning of September 11th, 20 years ago, according to the ancient ordinance, the scriptures and prayers regarding judgment were being recited in the morning. Recited even in New York City before it happened. And the scriptures of national judgment and calling for mercy. And then the shofars were sounded throughout with a link to the rising of the sun, the first light of dawn and the sunrise. So in the morning of 9/11, the trumpets of the watchmen, the alarm that warned the ancient city that an attack was coming, began to sound in America. And it began to sound according to the sunrise, so it first sounded on America's northeast coast. It was appointed to sound first in Maine, so in Portland, Maine, it began to sound, and that's where the terrorists were. That's where it all began. The trumpets were appointing to sound there in Maine at approximately 5:45 a.m. At approximately 5:45 a.m., the first terrorists were in Portland Airport, passing through security. Their picture got taken, heading to the gate to begin the attack. So the ancient sound of the watchman's warning was sounding. As the sunrise moved west, the ancient trumpets began to sound in Boston. And it was there and then in Boston that the terrorists would take off for their target, as the ancient alarm was sounding warning. The sunrise continued to move, and the trumpet of the watchman's warning now began sounding in New York City, the next site of attack. As the sound echoed throughout the city, warning that the enemy was coming to attack, it was all over New York City. As the sun continued its rising, the watchman's alarm began sounding then lastly in Washington, D.C., the last site of destruction. And according to the ancient ordinance, the trumpet sounded first in the first portion of the day. They can sound up to 4 hours, or a certain segment of the day comes out to 4 hours. The sun rose in New York City just after 6:30 a.m. That means the time of the trumpet's watchman warning ended just around 10:30 a.m. The last major event of 9/11 happened when the last tower came crumbling down, happened just about 10:29, and then the trumpet stopped sounding. So the morning of 9/11, as the nation's enemies were initiating their mission of destruction, when the Defense Department had no idea, when the intelligence agencies had no idea, the world's most sophisticated early warning system 20 years ago failed to discern the ancient biblical alarm that warned cities of the enemy's attack was sounding. And yet the warning was missed then. It's been missed since then. Before judgment falls on a nation, God sends warning. The biblical sound of that warning is the trumpet. That's the physical sound. It's striking to see that what happened 20 years ago with all these warnings in a sense, and of course nobody realized it, because even that, America has ignored the warning of God ever since and has hardened itself. What happens to a city that ignores the sound of the watchman? What happens to that city or a nation? America clearly has not heeded that, and 20 years later we can say that America has not only not returned to God, it has apostatized much deeper and farther since. And the warnings have gone unheeded. And that brings us to where we are now. This weekend I'm led to speak about the watchman and about the call of the watchman, and that means you. God says in Isaiah 62, I've set watchmen on your walls, Jerusalem. They will never hold their peace. Don't be quiet. Don't be silent, watchmen. The word for watchman in the Bible, in the Hebrew, there's two major words. One is the word tzofeh. Try it. Tzofeh means one who beholds, one who looks up, one who looks carefully, one who waits, and one who keeps. The most famous word for the watchman is the word shomer. Try it. Means one who guards, one who takes heed, one who keeps. Comes from a root word, shamar, which means to hedge, to guard, to protect, to mark, to look narrowly, to observe, to preserve, to wait for, to keep, to save. So the watchman could also be called the protector, the hedger, the marker, the observer, the guard, the preserver, the waiter, the watcher, the keeper, the one who saves. It says, I have appointed watchmen. The watchman had to be appointed by man, but here God is saying, I'm appointing watchmen as well. They had a critical calling on which the entire fate of their culture, their civilization, depended. The watchmen had gigantic responsibility. Today we have defense systems all over the world. Then you had a watchman, or a few watchmen, responsible for the entire city or the kingdom for the safety. So they had to take their position seriously. They didn't have satellites, they had their eyes. They had to have a good eyesight. The watchman had to be focused, couldn't get distracted, couldn't get entangled on couldn't be distracted by what was going on in the city and the marketplace below him, couldn't hang out in the city to be a watchman, couldn't be involved with what everybody else was, it wouldn't be doing his job. Had to stay separate. He had to take his post on the walls, on the watchtower, on the gate. If he didn't take his position, could not do it. It says in Habakkuk, the prophet says, I will stand my watch. I will station myself on the rampart of the walls, and I will watch to see what he will say to me. Here the prophet is speaking as the watchman. That one of the symbols of the prophet is the watchman, because they had to warn their people. But the watchman had to be on the ramparts, had to be above the city in order to see what was coming over the horizon or in the distance. And the nighttime was the time of the watchman, especially because everybody was sleeping. It says in Isaiah 21, watchmen, what about the night? What about the night? They asked the watchman, because they're asleep. The watchman, the nighttime was the main time, the critical time. City slept, more vulnerable, when danger was likely to come, under the darkness, when few people were aware of anything. So the watchman had to stay awake, couldn't sleep, had to stay vigilant, couldn't get drowsy, had to keep himself up. That's why we speak of the different watches of the night. The Bible speaks of the first watch, the second watch, the third watch. It was the time of the watchman, the one who stayed up while everybody else was asleep. Not only did he dwell above the city, but he had to look from a high place, look at everything into the distance, train himself to see it. And if he saw anything, that's when he grabs the shofar, sets it to his mouth, and blows as hard as he can. Now the watchman not only would look for the danger, but also would be looking to see of good things. You know, if there was a procession of good things, the watchman would be the first to see it as well. He would see if a king was coming as well. The watchman would be the first. Now let's put it together. If you are a believer, you're born again, you are called to be a watchman or watchwoman or watch person, doesn't matter. Sophel, it means you are someone who's to behold, to look up. You're called to be one who waits on the Lord. Or also you're called a shomer, which means one who you're to be a guarder, a protector, a marker, a watcher, someone who saves. Why are you called to be a watchman? Because you're awake and the rest are sleeping. You see, the rest don't know. Those who aren't saved can't know. But you're saved. And the rest, if they don't wake up, are lost. So there's no way around it. Only you can be the watchman. And if you're in such a position, you're accountable for everybody else. You're called to be the watchman of your family, the watchman of those around you, the watchman of those you are working with, the watchman of your culture, your generation, watchman of America. It says, I have appointed you. You are appointed. This is a calling from God. You are the Lord's watchmen. And so the lost are depending on you even though they don't realize it. So you have a great charge in the same way the prophets were told they were accountable. How do you fulfill such a calling? Tonight I'm going to speak about the keys of being a watchman or watchwoman. And on Sunday it's going to get into a whole other realm about what's happening around us and where we have to go with this. But the first thing is you have to be a person of focus. It's so easy to get distracted, a million details to distract, but the watchman has to be focused. Focused on the Lord, focused on the things of God. It's so easy. One of the greatest the weapons the enemy has is to distract you. Distract you from your calling. Distract you from God's best will. Entangle you. The watchman can't watch the city or over the city if he's in the city. It's got to be on the walls of the city. That's crucial. You as the watchman cannot get entangled in everything that's going on around you. You can't get caught up in everything. The watchman couldn't get caught up in all that's going on below. You can't hang out in the city and be a watchman. You can't get caught up in all the things of the world and be a watchman. You can't get caught up in all sorts of petty things or the pursuit of money, of comfort, all these things, and fulfill your calling as a watchman. As a watchman, the watchman is separate. So you have to stay separate to the Lord. Separated to the Lord. Regardless of anything else in your life. You can't make a difference in this world if you aren't different from this world. You have to take your post on the walls above the world, above the culture, on the high place. You got to dwell in the high place. The Bible says we're to dwell in the heavenlies. When we have our live prayer conference during the week via our phones, during the week when we begin, I always end up praying, Lord, we take our stand, we take our station on the walls as your watchmen. The watchman was above the city. You got to station yourself above the city. If the watchman gets lost in those things, he's not going to fulfill, or she will not fulfill her call. If he's in the midst, if you're in the midst of everything, you can't see in the distance. You can't see the bigger picture when you're getting lost in everything around you. You won't be able to warn them. The key is you've got to get into living above. Fighting your fight above, ministering from above, everything from above. The watchman post, you see, it's a balance. How do we relate to the world? See, some believers say we should have nothing to do with the world at all. Just get out of the world, okay? Others say you got to have everything to do with the world. Which one is right? Both are. The Lord said you are not of the world. Be separate. But the Lord also said you are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth. Go into the world. The answer is the watchman's post. You see, you are to engage the world, affect the world, impact the world, but in order to do that, you have to be separate from the world. Which means you got to be separate from anything that would take you away from God, that would pollute you, defile you, entangle you. You might have to separate more and more from the world's entertainment, from its ways as it gets ungodly and satanic in many ways. I'm not saying all of that, all entertainment is wrong, but it's getting worse. But don't leave it at that. You separate from the darkness so you don't become dark, but now you're a light. Shine your light to the world, affect the world. Don't be not overcome by the world, but overcome the world. Now, this doesn't just apply to our culture and what's happening around, which I'm going to talk about on Sunday, and the attempt to cancel you, and what do you do about it? This also applies to your personal life. You're a watchman to the world, but you're also a watchman to your surroundings and your friends and your job and your circumstances, whatever you're going through. You are to impact everything around you. But some of you are doing it from below. You get so wrapped up in the situation that you're no good. You say, well, earthly good and heavenly. No, you got to be both. You can't minister the situation if you're getting so caught up in the situation. You got to say, wait a minute, let me go up the ladder. Let me go up the steps, away from the problem, away from all the junk. Let me get above it. Now I can minister to it. Get above the problem. Live from above. We are from above. What does it say? It says your life is above now with Messiah. Don't get lost in below, above. What else do we know? The night is especially the time of the watchman. It means when things get dark, the watchman the call of the watchman gets more important. You don't stop when it gets dark. That's when you kick in even more. When it gets darker, you rise to the calling. Hi, I'm Jonathan Cahn, and I hope you were blessed with the video. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. Feel free to share your reactions with your comments and how you were blessed, and share this video with your friends. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.